Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. You are most welcome here. I wanted to make some drippy candles for some Halloween mantle displays, and I wasn't going to make them for you because there's nothing really groundbreaking about drippy candles. Lots of people have made them. But then I was walking through Dollar Tree and I saw this candle, and then I saw this candle, and I decided it would be really fun to do a Dollar Tree candle makeover, and one of my muses suggested a cursed pirate theme. So I am really looking forward to making some cursed pirate candles from Dollar Tree candles. Let's go have some fun.
I have these beautiful old books that I bought at a used bookstore, and I bought them for decoration. I bought them because of their beautiful bindings. The place that I got them is this used bookstore in Boston. It's down this old brick alley, and you can see there's a sort of a green pillow in the window. That's for the cat that's usually sitting there. It's just the coolest place. And it had these really awesome books, which I bought. I wanted to use them in some Halloween decor, and I wanted to put a sort of a drippy looking candle on top of them. But obviously I don't want any wax or anything else on the actual books. So I thought I would create a drippy candle using this Dollar Tree LED candle that I have. And just for contrast, I wanted to show you this other candle, this sort of off-white candle, which I think I got on Amazon. And it's a little bit thicker, heavier. It's a more candle wax looking color. So I'm just sort of keeping that to the side as something to potentially inform my color choices for this candle. I also have this candle holder which has wax dripping. That would be from a hurricane at some point when we were using candles. We've had some hurricanes where we lost power for a really long time and resorted to candles. All right, so I decided that to prevent this from making any sort of mess on my book, I would use this little foam plate underneath it. So I still need to be able to get to the battery compartment and the on-off switch on the bottom of the candle. So I'm cutting a hole out of the foam plate, which is the size of the candle, so it will fit inside. And then what I'm going to do is start creating my drips using hot glue. Now there are hot glue sticks that come in colors. I just happen to have these mostly clear hot glue stick, so I'm going to use that, and I'm going to paint the candle when I'm done. And the first thing I did was just make sure that I could make something that looked like a puddle of wax. So I used some of the leftover foam from when I cut out of the plate, and I'm just practicing on that first. And that went pretty well. So I started with making puddles around the candle where I thought that I would want puddles to be. And this is a first layer. So I do think that the key to making this look realistic is building up the layers. So just starting with sort of a first layer of puddles at the bottom, you figure from one time when the candle burned, and then another time when the candle burns, right? More wax will come on top of that, but not exactly in the same pattern, and so on. So I went around and I tried to do different sizes and shapes. And then I thought I would cut those out because obviously I don't want this white base to show. Now they didn't cut out particularly neatly, and what I ended up doing was cutting each puddle out individually and gluing it to the candle. Now I glued them on and worked with them basically one at a time, but you don't have to do that. You could glue them all on and then work with it. I just thought there was more chance that I would accidentally break one off if I did that. So I started at the bottom where my puddle was and added a little bit more wax onto that, and then drew that up the candle. And it wasn't a particularly neat line. It had some little globs in it. I think that's okay. I think that's somewhat natural looking, although if you look at my little candlestick, they are pretty straight lines on there. But of course that's a very short area where the wax was dripping down. And so the first thing I did was glue all of those bottom puddles onto the bottom of the candle, and then draw the wax all the way up to the top. When I cut those puddles out, I did try to sort of angle with the scissors so that you wouldn't be able to see any of the foam, but so that the foam would be on the bottom and the foam would be touching the books when I placed the candle on the books. Now, once I had those longer drips going all the way around, I just filled in and layered with shorter drips. And I tried not to make those very even, but it's hard to avoid making patterns. But I did try not to make patterns and just started usually with a little bit of a glob, so sort of the end of a drip, and then a little bit thinner all the way up to the top. And for each drip, I sort of curved over the top of the candle a little bit. And I did maybe 3 or 4 layers, with each layer getting a little bit shorter than the last, so that the most drips were concentrated at the top of the candle. Now, to paint this, I originally planned to try to imitate that Amazon candle that I had. And then I thought I wanted to have a darker color underneath for just sort of some depth. And so I mixed some acrylic paint in white, burnt umber, and just a tiny drop of yellow for that color. So I had started with the original just sort of off-white color, which is the white with a little bit of yellow in it. And then I stopped after a little bit of painting and switched to this color with the burnt umber in it. And I did the whole candle in that. I liked that color so much that I decided to go with that color and give that highlights and lowlights rather than work with the original off-white color. Now, one thing to note with painting the candles once you've put all the drips on is that you do want to work to get the paint into those cracks. So it isn't as easy, of course, as painting just a flat candle. Now, for my next step, once the candle was dry, I did want to give it some depth. So I took the burnt umber paint and I watered it down a little bit. And then I took a dropper and I dropped it down the candle so that it would run down the candle and hopefully get in those cracks around the drips. You could also spray it on, put it in a spray bottle and spray it on. I don't really like doing that just because then I have to clean the spray bottle, and that's a little more difficult to clean than this little dropper. So I just dripped that around and blotted it anywhere that it looked too much like a drip and not really just sort of some dirt, that had gotten trapped in the cracks of the candle. And I kept doing that until I was happy with the way it looked. I also put some on the inside of the candle. And then once I was happy with that, I took some lighter paint. So this is white mixed with a tiny, tiny bit of yellow. And I mixed that in with what was left of the brown. And I just dry brushed that over the drips on the candle, just again to give it just a little bit more dimension. So we have that base color and then the lowlights, which is the watery brown paint that we dripped in, and then highlights, which is this lighter paint which we're just brushing over the top. And then the final step is a complete coat of Mod Podge, and this is the matte Mod Podge that I'm brushing over just to seal that paint in, because paint on a candle will very easily get scraped off. So I did that over the entire candle, including the inside. Now for my second candle, I have this candle which I got at the Dollar Tree called Light Up Decor, and it looks like a skull, and it is just an LED candle. And I thought this was so cool. This is the one that really did inspire me to remake some Dollar Tree candles. And I also have these beads. They're almost like Mardi Gras beads, and they have little skulls and little bones. And I have 2 strands of these orange beads. I bought this again at the Dollar Tree. It came with 2 strands of orange beads, 1 strand of purple beads, and 1 strand of black beads. So I'm going to make over the Light Up Decor candle holder and the 2 strands of orange beads. And I'm going to make this over to look like some pirate treasure. So I'm going to begin by painting everything with this Deco Art Metallics in Rich Espresso. It's acrylic paint. I'm just going to give a coat to the candle, and I'm going to coat the inside as well, which is a little tricky because of the LED light in the bottom. But because you can see into the inside through the features of the skull, I want to make sure that the whole thing looks like it is made of metal. With the beads, they're a little bit tricky to paint, and so for the first coat, I just brushed over the top of them, but for the second coat, which I don't show here, I actually held each bead and really tried to paint all the way around the bead to make sure I got pretty good coverage. But the reason I chose the orange ones was because I thought if a little bit of that orange showed through, it wouldn't really make a big difference. Now, to make that cup look more like it's real metal, to make it look less flat, to give it some depth, I'm going to start by giving it some dirtier areas. So I'm going to use this Folk Art Multi-Surface acrylic paint in chocolate brown, and I'm going to mix with that a little bit of my burnt umber paint to make it a little bit darker. And I'm going to just sort of dab it over the beads. But for the cup, I'm going to focus on the depression areas, so like the eye sockets, the nose, the jaw area, the teeth. I'm going to put it around the bottom of the cup, and I'm going to just dab it on the cup in places to make it look like the cup's been handled. And you might want to mix a little bit of water into this to make it a little bit easier to apply. You don't want it too heavy. Now I also want highlights. So I'm going to take some of this DecoArt Metallics Champagne Gold, and I'm going to use that for highlights. And I'm just using the paints that I already had. So if you have different metallic paints and you have them in sort of a bronze sort of shade and then a darker shade and a lighter shade, those will probably work just as well, if not better. Or if you go shopping, look for ones that seem to go together. These, again, are the ones that I just happen to have, but they seem to work just fine for this application. So with the light color, I was putting that on the raised areas, so sort of around the eye sockets, the upper parts, and across the top, across the bottom. And with the beads, I just sort of put it on the little skulls and sort of dry brushed it over the bones, just to hit those high areas of those. Now I'm going to do a verdigris effect to make this look like it's just really crusty and old and it's been in a damp corner of the ship's hold for a really long time. And again, I'm just working with the paints that I have. So this is the most teal paint that I have. It's a home decor chalk paint and the color is Grotto. I'm going to mix that with a little bit of black and a tiny bit of water, and then I am going to put that basically in the same areas where I put the lowlights. So just sort of distributed over the piece, in the corners, but also in other places sort of as randomly as I can. So I picked those spots that looked like they had been handled, the places where I had put the darker paint on the back, and I also put it there and I put it around the bottom, just sort of dab that on. And I decided to do one of the sets of beads and not the other. I just thought maybe they were stored in different conditions, and let's see what it looks like with one of them sort of verdigrised and the other one not. Now the next step is going to probably make it look worse before it makes it look better, but it does give the piece more depth. So I added more black to the paint and a little bit more water, and just sort of dab that over the places where we had the green paint. Not completely covering it, but again, giving it a little bit more depth. It's going to look better in the next step. Okay, so the final step for the verdigris effect is this lighter blue paint, still a little bit on the teal side, and this one is the home decor chalk paint and the color is Cascade. I love this color, I love this paint, and we're going to use only a very little amount of this, but dab this over those places where we already put the verdigris. So this is sort of the final layer of crustiness on the verdigris, and in one spot I felt like I just really needed to add more on the front there, so I put a little bit of that and then I went back and added a little bit of the black paint into it to make it look a little bit more like the other paints, more layered. And of course I did the same thing with the set of beads to which I was applying the verdigris finish. Now we want to Mod Podge everything, and again this is to keep that paint from getting scratched off. It is definitely challenging to Mod Podge the beads just as it was challenging to paint them in the first place, but a few applications, flipping the beads around, and you will get it applied. Now the third and final candle is this glass pillar with black wax inside that I thought looked really cool, and I think it looks cool just the way it is. It's just kind of creepy. When I pulled the plastic label off, it did leave a little bit of residue behind, and you could wash that off, maybe use some Goo Gone. But what I had decided to do was apply a new label to this anyway, and I thought because we're having a pirate theme that I would make this one of those candles that counts down time, but instead of counting down hours, I thought we would count down like the bells of the watch. So I created a label for this which has lines marking the bells. So the idea is if the candle burns to that point, 1 bell, then 2 bells, etc., up to 8 bells. And I put a ship's name at the top, the Whydah, which is a pirate ship that sunk in a nor'easter off the coast of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And if you would like to use this label yourself, you certainly can. I will include a link in the description to my blog where I have this image. It is, I think, 2 inches by 6 inches. I sized it to fit onto this candle. And it does have a sort of background which looks like parchment, but it doesn't look old and dirty enough yet. So we are going to dirty it up a bit. So the first thing I did was I just sprayed it with water and then crumpled it up and let it dry. This might be unnecessary because of the next step. For the next step, I took my brown acrylic paint, my burnt umber, and mixed it with some water and then took my dropper and dripped onto it. Again, you could use a spray bottle for this, but I don't like to get paint in a spray bottle. So I did that, and then I used a towel to sort of wipe it around, and I crumpled it some more. And then I wanted to put some ink splotches on it to make it look like it was written on with a feather pen, and it wasn't done very well. It was messy. So I took some black paint and I watered it down, and I kept practicing trying to get some kind of ink spot looking thing. I was only able to achieve one ink spot with my dropper that looked like what I was looking for, the sort of ink spot that has lines radiating out from it and droplets radiating out from it. So what I did was I just sort of tried to reproduce that with a paintbrush. So I dropped some paint on and then sort of splotched around it. And you can see me doing one here. I actually did 2 on the final label. And then once that was dry, I just used Mod Podge. I'm sure you could use white glue to apply it to the candle. And then I did Mod Podge over it, including a little bit over the edge and onto the glass of the candle, just so that it wouldn't peel off. Now, a few staging items that I decided to use with these candles. I have this crow from years ago. He's pretty beat up looking, but I figured that's okay. Instead of a parrot, I thought maybe that this cursed pirate ship would have a crow. And so I found just an old sock that was in a color that I liked, and I made him sort of a makeshift eye patch from that sock and hot glue. And then I used some brown felt to make him a tricorn hat. And I did have to glue the tricorn hat to the eye patch, but the eye patch, because it was a sock, was stretchy, so that stuck well over his eye. And then at the Dollar Tree, I bought these red tapers, and I also bought this black creepy cloth, and I used those to stage as well. And here are our cursed pirate candles.
So what did you think of our cursed pirate candle makeover? Did you have a favorite? If so, tell me in the comments. This one is my favorite because I really do like this patina effect. I almost brought this into my bathroom where I have a brass towel bar which has some patina on it, just to show you how realistic this effect really is, unfortunately. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.